Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on what time of day it is for you. My name is Shawn Casemore, and I want to welcome you to the 10-Minute Sales Multiplier. Each and every Monday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I arrive here and share with you a strategy really designed to help you multiply your sales. Those strategies are based on, and many of them are actually captured in my latest book, The Sales Multiplier Formula. Now, today, we're going to talk about 3 ways to ask for a referral. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Shawn, that's kind of boring, right? 3 ways to ask. How many ways can there be? Why does it really matter as long as I ask, right? To some extent, that's true. But here's what I want you to consider. Generally speaking, there's 3 ways that you can ask for a referral. There's a direct ask. Hey, Shawn, wondering if you'd be able to connect me with another general manager in this area who might be interested in our product or our services. There's the indirect ask. This has been great. Appreciate the opportunity to work with you on this important project. The feedback that I've received from your team as well as yourself is great. And it's just, that's really how we've built our business, is from great clients such as yourselves, who in many cases end up introducing us to their colleagues and other, obviously non-competitors in their region who they think we could help. So there's an example of an indirect. And then there's the detailed ask, which I'm not going to replicate. We only have less than 10 minutes. It's not enough time. But as you can imagine, it drones on quite a bit. Now, what I want to suggest to you is how you tend to ask for referrals is based on your preferences, yours. So let me say that again. How you tend to ask for referrals is based on your preferences. Now, what do I mean by that? If you've ever done any sort of behavioral assessment, and there's all sorts of them out there, what you'll know from having completed that is that, number one, you have your own behaviors. Okay. What do I mean by behaviors? Well, some people are very direct. Some people are very quiet and reserved. Some people are very analytical and detailed, et cetera, et cetera. So there are different behaviors that exist that each person has. And many studies have found that those behaviors are developed by a young age and they really don't change much, although our behaviors can shift depending on the environment we're in. But the general behaviors that we have tend to stay with us. So if you're somebody who's direct, most often you won't suddenly become detailed. You'll stay relatively direct. Again, depending on the profile of your behavior. Why all of this matters is you need to be a chameleon when it comes to asking for referrals. There's different ways you can ask, but your inclination is going to be to ask in a way that your behavior suggests you ask. So if you tend to be a direct person, you're going to ask in a very direct way. Here's the problem. When you ask in a way that is based on your natural behaviors, what you're forgetting is the most important part of the referral, which is considering the behaviors and the preferences of your prospects or your clients or customers. For example, if you're working with somebody who's a CFO or a VP finance, presumably they're somewhat detail-oriented. They're in a financial role. It's more than likely there's some analytical style or behavior that they have within them. So if you're to ask them and being too direct and don't provide enough detail, there's a risk that they won't be able to respond or just won't respond at all. They won't give you the referral. So what I want to suggest to you is, although there's at least 3 ways you can ask for a referral: direct, indirect, and detailed, in reality, when and how you use those should really depend on the person that you're interacting with. So when you're dealing with a client or customer and you've gotten to know them, before you ask for a referral, ask yourself this question. What style of behavior does this person have? What have I observed in our conversations and interactions, in the communications I've received, the emails, etc.? How would I best describe their behavior? Are they somebody who's pretty direct and short and to the point? Or are they more detailed and they like to ask questions and analyze things? Or are they a little more patient and reserved? You get where I'm going. You essentially take the 4 predominant behavioral styles and you compare or contrast those against the person you're dealing with. And then based on that, you select the best way to ask for a referral. So again, if I'm a direct person, but I assess the other person I'm going to ask the referral of is more detail oriented, I might ask in a more detailed manner, which is not my natural inclination, right? My inclination is to ask in a way that I want to ask in a behavior that makes sense to me. So you always want to consider the person you're asking the referral from and consider their natural behavior so you can position your referral ask in the right way. really is like going back to a menu of different options in how you ask and determining which item makes the most sense for this individual. Now, a couple other tips to make sure your referral asks land well. If the person you're asking is very direct and to the point, make sure, obviously, you consider that and you use more of a direct ask. But note, you may need to ask on a couple different occasions because people that are very direct and blunt tend to be also fast-paced. They tend to be task-focused, so they're sometimes distracted. So you may want to tie this into another conversation you're having, but you may want to ask in multiple occasions so that eventually they go, you know what, you did ask me that before. Here's what I've come up with. Another example would be if you're asking someone who's very detail-oriented, who asks a lot of questions, they take a lot of time to think through what you typically say to them. You'll want to ask in a detailed manner, but they will want time to consider what your ask is. So just asking them in a meeting or while on a virtual call, such as what we're doing right now, may not land well because they're not going to give it the time and effort that they typically would to give you a good response. So what you might consider doing, and some of my clients have had great luck with, is creating a video. You can record on Zoom, on Teams, or use something like StreamYard that I'm using here. Vidyard is another tool. You can go on to these and record a personalized message. And you can extrapolate, you can expand a bit. You've got time to do it. They usually give you several minutes. Then you send that video off to them in an email, and you just say, hey, I was giving thought to some of the work we've been doing. I wanted to ask you a question. I thought this video was an easier way to explain. And then you make that video very personalized to them. But by doing it this way, A, you're able to give them that detail that they're looking for. B, you're doing it in a format that's not so boring. They don't have to read a book that you wrote in an email to them. Of course, oftentimes referrals are best asked in person, but for somebody who's detailed, they'll need time to think about it. So putting it into a video is a great alternative. Last but not least, when you ask in that manner, they can sit with that video. They can rewatch that video. They can play back what your ask is when it's convenient for them and then respond accordingly. So what I want to suggest to you today, and the point of this 10-minute sales multiplier, is that when you're asking for referrals, we've talked a lot in the past about the different stages in the sales cycle that you can ask. We've talked a lot about different language, different ways to ask. What I want you to consider today is if you think that there's really only a few ways you can ask: direct, indirect, meaning drop a hint in a conversation, or more detailed, elaborating in greater depths as far as who you're looking for, what kind of companies they're in, etc. But really, what precludes that selection of your approach should be the person you're asking it from and what their natural behaviors are. Don't let your behavior determine whether or not you use a direct or an indirect approach or a detailed approach. Let the person who's on the receiving end, their behavior guide which approach you take. So this requires a little bit of effort on your part, but as you might imagine, when we position a referral ask in a way that lands well, it matches up with the behavior of the person we're sending it to. What does that do? Well, they tend to relate more to our message. It comes off a little more genuine for them, and it caters to their behavior, which they appreciate. So there's a much better chance you'll actually get the referral as a result. So that has been today's 10-minute sales multiplier. Something I wanted to mention here briefly is that I'm going to be getting together a group of top performing sales professionals in June. The dates are still out there. I'm still narrowing it down. There's a couple we're looking at the moment. It's just going to be a virtual meeting to come together and discuss and share best practices. I call it the Sales Masters Roundtable. And what I'd like to do is suggest to you, if you're a top performing sales professional, you want to connect with others in a virtual environment to talk about and share best practices, send me a quick email and let me know, and I'll put you on the waiting list. You can just send that email to info@ShawnCasemore.com. I'll get back to you so you know it's been received. We'll put you on the waiting list, and then we'll share further details with you as we get closer to that date. I hope you will consider joining us, and I hope you'll try this out this week. Try this 10-minute sales multiplier. Start to consider the different behaviors of the people that you are going to ask a referral from, and then select the right approach and ask. If you do nothing else this week, at least ask. If you don't do any of those previous steps, at least ask. You cannot get any referrals if you don't ask. Appreciate your time as always. If you've got topics you'd like me to share on the 10-minute sales multiplier, again, send me a quick email, info@ShawnCasemore.com. Always looking for your questions that we can answer here, and appreciate you joining and spending some time with us. And until next time, let's get out there and go sell something. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.